Questions to the Prime Minister. Andrew Bridgen.
Question 1, Mr. Speaker.
Office and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. The Right Honourable Gentleman is a notable celebrity, not only in Aylesbury, but here in this House. The Right Honourable Gentleman.
Mr. Speaker, I have been asked to reply. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is in Northern Ireland outlining this government's commitment to the people there and our plan to secure a Brexit deal that delivers on the result of the referendum. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the whole House will want to join me in welcoming today's announcement that the next meeting of NATO heads of state and government will take place in London in December 2019. This is fitting, as 70 years ago this year, the United Kingdom, led by those Atlanticist champions Clement Attlee and Ernie Bevin, was one of the Alliance's 12 founding members, and London was home to the first NATO headquarters. We will continue to play a key role in NATO as it continues its mission of keeping nearly 1 billion people safe.
Andrew Bridgen.
Mr. Speaker, I've always considered the Leader of the Opposition to be just an unreconstructed Marxist. However, in light of video footage that's emerged this week, I may well have to change that view. He clearly campaigned vigorously against repeated EU referendums in Ireland and declared forcefully that he did not wish to live under a European empire of the 21st century. So in this spirit of cross-party consensus, would my right honourable friend join with the Leader of the Opposition to dismiss once and for all any prospect of a second EU referendum and reaffirm that we're leaving on the 29th of March?
Mr. Speaker, I can say to my honourable friend that the government's position is clear. We said to the British people in 2016 that we would accept their vote as decisive, and the duty of politicians is to implement the result of the referendum and not to suggest that the public got it wrong and I think undermined trust in democracy.
The Honourable Lady is a notable celebrity, not merely in Islington but here in this House. Emily Thornberry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm so glad to renew my acquaintance with the Minister for the Cabinet Office, or as the newspapers always call him, effectively the Deputy Prime Minister. Surely the only occasion these days when the words Prime Minister and effective are used in the same sentence. And while there are many other important issues that I would like to discuss with the Cabinet Office Minister today, sadly none is more vital or urgent than Brexit. So I would like to use our time to have a sensible, grown-up discussion about what the actual plan is between now and March the 29th. And to this end, can I ask him this? If the briefing is correct that that there will not be a fresh, meaningful vote on the withdrawal agreement next week, and if that's right, when will the vote take place?
I think that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, was completely clear on this at this dispatch box last week. She said that the meaningful vote itself would be brought back as soon as possible, and if it were not possible to bring the meaningful vote back by the 13th, next Wednesday, the government would then make a statement and would then table a motion for debate the next day.
Emily Thornberry.
I thank the Minister for that answer, Mr. Speaker, and I take from that and from other briefings that we've heard is that the time for a fresh vote will be after the Prime Minister has secured what she called last week a significant and legally binding change to the withdrawal agreement, so that this House has something genuinely different to vote on. If that is the case, can the Minister simply clarify what will happen if we start to approach March the 29th and those significantly legally binding changes have not been achieved?
Well, the Prime Minister, I think, has been announced by Number 10, is going to be in Brussels tomorrow, where she will be seeing President Juncker, President Tusk and the President of the European Parliament, Mr. Tajani, to discuss the changes that she is seeking following the recent votes in this House, both to reject the deal that was on the table and to support the amendment in the name of my right honourable friend, the member for Altrincham and Sale West. I do think that the Honourable Lady, the Right Honourable Lady, does need, not just perfectly fairly to question the government, but actually to face up to the fact that if, as both she and I wish, we are to leave the EU in an orderly manner with a deal, it requires this House to vote in favour of a deal and not just declare that it doesn't want a no-deal scenario.
Emily Thornberry.
Again, I'd like to thank the Minister. But does the Prime Minister seriously think that she will get anything different than the responses that we've heard from the EU over recent days? Because none of them have given us any encouragement that they are willing to reopen the withdrawal agreement unless the Prime Minister is willing to reconsider the red lines on which the agreement is based. So does the Minister not agree that the sensible, cautious thing to do at this late stage is to seek a temporary extension of Article 50 so that we have time to see whether the negotiations succeed, or if they do not, to pursue a different plan?
It is the problem with the proposition that the Right Honourable Lady puts forward is that it would simply defer the need for this House, and including the opposition front bench, to face up to some difficult decisions. Now, the Right Honourable Lady has criticised the approach that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has taken, but I have to put it to her that the Leader of the Opposition, last week, having met the Prime Minister, went out in front of the cameras and demanded changes to the backstop as part of the approach he wanted to see for the future. The Right Honourable Lady has said that she would be comfortable with the backstop. Does she agree with her leader, or is she sticking to her guns on this?
Thornberry.
I hear what the Minister is saying, but he doesn't seem to give us any answers. I genuinely appreciate his attempts, but I hope he will understand the concern that all of us have, not just in this House, but across the country, that we have a government treading water in the Niagara River while the current is taking us over the falls. So can we go...
Be quiet. The whip on duty's got no useful contribution to make other than to nod and shake his head in the appropriate places. No chuntering from a sedentary position from the honourable gentleman is required or will persist. Emily Thornberry.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. So can we go back to the central issue, which is this? There is no way that we can avoid a border in Ireland after Brexit without a full customs union or a permanent backstop or some new technological solution. So can the Minister tell us which of those options the government is currently working towards?
Yeah. Minister.
Well, the Right Honourable Lady again makes this commitment saying that the Labour Party wants to see a permanent customs union. But what most people who support a customs union say they want is to ensure that businesses can expect to export to the EU without tariffs, quotas or rules of origins checks. And that is precisely what the Prime Minister's deal does, but also allows this country to establish trade agreements with other nations around the world. So what part of that deal does the Right Honourable Lady actually object to?
If the honourable gentleman would like me to answer questions, I would be quite happy to hold a seminar for him at another stage as to what a proper Brexit ought to look like. But may I continue with my job, and perhaps he can continue with his and answer some questions. The technological solution is a non-starter. A permanent backstop will never be acceptable to the ERG or the DUP, and the only solution that will actually work is a full customs union. That is what I said at our first encounter here in 2016. It is the answer that is staring the government in the face. If they backed it, it would command a majority in this House. It would avoid the mayhem and the chaos of no deal. And it would protect the jobs at Nissan, Airbus and elsewhere, which are currently at grave risk. So can the Minister explain why the Prime Minister is so dead against it?
Well, even if we take the Right Honourable Lady's somewhat ill-defined description of a permanent customs union, that would not address issues in respect of Northern Ireland and Ireland, in respect of either regulatory standards for industrial goods or phytosanitary checks for foodstuffs and for livestock. So even in her own terms, her answer is inadequate. Now, she may well then go on to say that she also wants to be part of a single market, and indeed the Right Honourable Lady has said that she'd be happy with the same place as Norway, but that means free movement continuing, and her party's manifesto explicitly said that free movement would stop. So is the Right Honourable Lady supporting a Norway model, or is she supporting the Labour Party's manifesto?
Emily Thornberry!
Flattered though I am that the Minister feels it necessary to ask me questions, I do feel that it is important to make it clear that the reason that I have asked these questions today is that the Minister for the Cabinet Office understands Europe, Northern Ireland and Brexit probably better than any of his Cabinet colleagues. So if anyone could give us answers from the government, it would be him. But the truth is there are no answers. Plan A has been resoundingly rejected by Parliament, Plan B was ruled out by the EU months ago, and the government is in danger of sleepwalking the country towards leaving with no plan and no deal at all. So, with just over 50 days to go, can I give the Minister a final opportunity to tell us whether there is a better plan than this, or for goodness sake, will they let Parliament take charge instead?
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, the Prime Minister will be reporting back to this House next week following her discussions in Brussels and elsewhere. But I have to say to the Right Honourable Lady, the 2-year deadline, the 29th of March deadline, stems from European law and the wording of Article 50, which lays down the 2 years. The Right Honourable Lady, as I recall, voted in favour of triggering Article 50. Now, perhaps, Mr. Speaker, it was one of those votes where she was present but not involved. But I have to say to her and to her front bench that if they are worried about no deal, they have to vote for a deal, and every time they vote against a deal, the risk of no deal becomes greater. And it really is time for the opposition front bench, for once, to put the national interest first, do the right thing, and vote for a deal.